Alright, welcome to another 40k video. We're going to be talking about something. My two sources for the video are going to be the 40k wiki, and about halfway through I started using the lexiconum, so sources are going to differ a little bit, but I'll let you know when that happens. But aside from that, welcome to the creativity dump. I wanted a 40k video this week, and I brushed off so much lore during the successor chapter series that, I have more than enough stuff to go back and look at. And today we're going to be covering one that no one else has, so uncharted territory. I'm not copying anybody. Unless fucking within the month that's somebody before. Unless somebody makes a fucking video on this goddamn battle a month before, or in between the month that I'm going to be doing. You know what I'm fucking saying, alright? I don't need to explain myself to you. But getting the Loyalist forces out of the way, I'm just going to say who was in it, and then we'll go into it. So it was the Dark Angels, the Consecrators, the Knights of the Crimson Order, the Angels of Absolution, the Repentant Brotherhood, and the Angels of Redemption. And for the Traitor Legions, or forces, you have Typhus and Marir Astalan, who's from the Fallen. Alright, now that we got all that hoot and handy out of the way, the Battle of the Caliban system was between the Dark Angels and their edgy counterpart, the Fallen, and a mix of Death Guard as well, with a couple twists. Admittedly, despite the lack of lore in the 40k wiki, and later the Lexiconum does fill that in, but I do think this is interesting enough to maybe squeeze a 10-minute video out of, so we'll see how it holds up. Given a not too brief synopsis of the fight, the Dark Angels ran to the Caliban system after Cypher, the Dark Angels, Bin Laden turned himself in with and warned Typhus and the Fallen Angels were going to use a machine to make a time rift and bring the 30k Dark Angels into 40k and use the 40k and 30k Dark Angels with the Legions of Typhus and the Loyalist gene seed from the Dark Angels that they found to make a what's the word? To make a whole new legion named the Death Angels. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I'm not reading my script. So the Rock, with the Rock in the Caliban system and every Dark Angel on it, they fought the freshly arriving 2/3 of the Death Angels, well I guess half, because, the gene seed, which the wiki describes as not that hard of a fight, and I'm just going to quote it directly. The Chaos Fleet was large but unfocused, as even Typhus was more concerned about the overseeing the ritual to bring the Fallen forward in time than he was directing the battle, which admittedly isn't too bad of an idea, considering he's bringing, like, fucking 30,000. We're gonna get into that later, but he's bringing a lot of Space Marines back into the fight. So if the ritual went successful, he wouldn't have even needed to be at the fight anyways. But anyways, speaking of rituals and time rifts, the name of this thing is the Tukulka, which I made its own little paragraph, because if I put it in the middle of a paragraph at the beginning of this, I would have killed myself. But I kind of got acclimated with the word, as you can see later. Supreme Grandmaster Azrael convinced the sentient Tukulka to scatter both Fallen and the Death Guard on both ends of the Time Warp. Well, 30k Death Guard were not scattered because they weren't anywhere near Caliban at the time. Where was I? And then after the wormhole / time rift / whatever the fuck you want to call it was closed, a bunch of second founding Unforgiven chapters showed up to kind of beat everything. What was left around the wormhole. So mostly, I don't know. With that bottom of the barrel horrible summarization out of the way, let's get into dissecting the battle. And with my biggest question, why would Cypher betray the Fallen? Alright, so Cypher is a mystery, even to the Dark Angels who have been hunting him down since the fall of Caliban, basically. Cypher's been seen in all 5 segmenti, which is the Segmenta Obscurus, Segmenta Tempestus, Segmentum Pacificus, and the 2 others that nobody fucking cares about. And he always brings death and destruction with him, and even though this is also a mystery of how all it happens, because nobody knows if he's directly responsible for the catastrophes or if he's just 40k's Mothman. At least that's what the wiki says. However, the very next paragraph starts with Cypher seldom instigates the violent acts and invariably occur when he is present. So, I don't know. Next, it explains how Cypher's mere presence just makes people distrust and hatred go off the fritz, implying that Cypher just makes shit happen without even doing it. This doesn't happen on Loyalist planets either. Chaos Space Marines also interrogate their subordinates after he leaves their strongholds. The only certain thing about Cypher is wherever he goes, the Dark Angels do follow. With such a mysterious lore blurb, Cypher leaves everybody on both in and out of the universe with nothing but speculation, which we're going to do here. Firstly, the nature of this random appearing and disappearing reminds me of 2 major things. One that I don't like, but one that I really like, but I know that isn't true. The one that I don't like is that Cypher is just an Alpha Legionnaire who was on Caliban at the time, and after the great fucking chutzpah we're going to get into earlier, he just kind of got caught up in the personality of Cypher. Just started fucking with the Ultramarines like that. And now for the theory that I like, but I know it isn't true. And this one's going to need some explanation. So in the Dornian heresy, the Raven Guard fell to Tzeentch instead of the Thousand Sons, hear me out, and the Raven Guard leaned into the blue and pink voodoo to enhance their stealth. And this reminds me of this other rabbit hole, where there's this YouTube channel called Tabletop Time, and they did a Dornian heresy Raven Guard of this dude phasing through the wall, which they kind of like turn the wall into a soupy, shadowy thingy. Which reminds me of like the 3 different times in the same paragraph describing what Cypher looked like, where the wiki page just said he was wrapped in shadow constantly. So, you know, maybe if he's such a mysterious and shadowy figure, and it does say that he's on several missions, but only he knows the goal of, maybe this is just like he's Tzeentch's greatest soldier. He's like God's greatest schizophrenic, I don't know. I mean, it would explain the mysterious nature and his disappearing acts, but I like it. I don't think GW is gonna confirm anything for obvious reasons, but despite Cypher teaming up with a Dark Angel seemingly out of character at face value, once you get into his once you get further into his own lore, it does seem that he just kind of does whatever. Like, like there's in his wiki page, he talked about several times where he fought with the Imperium against Chaos. So maybe his goals are beyond everybody's comprehension, including his own. But yeah, but he's a pretty blank slate, so I think I'll be able to shoehorn him into the conclusion somehow at the later end of the video. Alright, now here's where things are going to start derailing, and I'm going to sound like a fucking schizophrenic guy. But the next thing I want to ask is, what the hell is a Tukulka? So firstly, I did Google it, just because it was like a weird fucking word. I figured it was maybe them just grabbing names from something like Magnus and, you know, fucking Fenris, stuff like that. Maybe they were just grabbing something from mythology that I could have found, which luckily I did. But I went to its wikipedia.org page, and I'm just going to read exactly what I put in the script. The Tukulka is a real thing, an entity carved into an Etruscan tomb in Italy. If that isn't the most off the fucking bonkers shit I've ever heard, but let's keep going. The entity known as Tukulka lived in the underworld, however its only physical depiction is shown, as previously stated, in the tomb where Tukulka is shown visiting the underworld, which is weirdly apt considering that the battle is about Caliban, a planet that has been dead for 10 millennia. So that is some crazy ball knowledge to whoever the fuck wrote the book that this battle come from. Another thing I want to note about the Tukulka is the Tukulka entity. Tukulka, dude, I'm gonna kill myself. It sounded a lot easier to say in my head. Is that it's thought to be female due to a diamond pattern that is found on females of the common European adder, which is hilarious to me because I remember when Lich's Laboratory was doing a video on the Astartes Praeses, and he was racking his brain for 10 minutes in the script trying to figure out how to connect the common European adder to the Viper Legion. And he knew it was there, he just didn't know where, and we found it. We found it, Lich. Alright, however, for the rest of this video, I am going to use both the 40k and the 40k wiki and the lexicon as sources. And from what I found, Tukulka is a demon world orbited by shipyards carrying both treasures and demons. Go figure. Honestly, really cool sounding place for a 40k D&D game. Maybe I'll talk further on this on another video. Actually, let me write that down. I have a notepad of just other 40k videos I want to make. Sorry, it sounds really cool to have a treasure planet in 40k. Y'all remember watching Treasure Planet? That shit was great. Anyways, so that was the 40k wiki. The Lexiconum stated that the Tukulka, as it fits into the battle, was a machine found by Lionel Johnson during the heresy, and the Lion actually prevented pre-corruption Typhon, first captain of the Death Guard, from using it. Now, the exact nature of what the Tukulka does is not stated, but it's described as an engine, and it was said that Lion would confide in it, along with getting frustrated when the Tukulka couldn't navigate through the warp storm surrounding Terra during Horus's siege. So it's entirely possible that it was a more stable warp drive, which would make sense at the end of the segment. Actually, it wouldn't. What the fuck am I talking about? Now, here's where the video is going to get really weird, as if it hasn't already. I wrote down the summary of the video at the beginning of the 40k wiki off the sole 40k wiki source, and now I'm looking at Lexiconum, and it's saying something very different. So I'm going to try and re-summarize using both sources to try and cross-examine and figure out what the hell's going on. And hopefully we'll get a more clear picture. So 40k wiki states that Cypher turned himself in and warned the heretics that the Tukulka engine, the only one, was going to be used in the Caliban system to stop the Death Angels from becoming a thing. The Lexiconum states that Cypher told somebody, didn't say who, that the Tukulka was embedded deep in the rock, and the other two engines were being found by the Typhus and Marir. Were both searching for the other two, and Cypher promising the Dark Angels could rewrite history, along with making no mention of the Death Angels at all. Seems like a pretty big detail to me, but you know. In both sources, the warp rift was created, with time being ripped open to Caliban pre-exploding, which we're going to get on that later. Oh boy. The Lexiconum states that Azrael destroyed the warp rift, and the 40k wiki states that the Tukulka scattered hold on. So the Lexiconum states that Azrael destroyed the warp rift, but the 40k wiki states that a Ravenwing, Black Knight, and Nail closed the warp rift. And the 40k wiki states that the Tukulka scattered forces on both ends of the rift through the warp, and the Lexiconum states that only the present-day traders were scattered through something similar to the warp. But not the warp, which is very, very crucial detail, as we'll get here soon. And thank you for sitting through that. From the cross-examination, I feel like we still can't fully comprehend what the Tukulka engines are, because I don't think that Typhus brought an entire planet into the Caliban system. So, looking further into the lore of the Tukulka engines, it's stated that Vashtor the Archiphane sought the triad of Tukulka engines to create something called the Key, to use on something called the Lock, to access something the old ones called the Weapon. Thank God the fucking old ones didn't name the Space Marine chapters, otherwise that would have been fucking horrible. The blue ones. the cold ones, the nightly ones. That would have been fucking horrible. So the triad were collected through one way or another and sent or assembled into the wormwood, where Vashtor now searches in a rift described as, and I quote, between the materium and the warp, not unlike the webway. And that's where he's looking for the weapon. So now that we have pretty much everything there is on the Tukulka, on both, on everything we can get about the Tukulka without buying several Black Library books, let's try to fully understand what they are now. So the Tukulka engines are 3 machines that predate the Imperium, can open rifts in both the warp time and something not unlike the webway, and have access to an Old One's weapon. Using this, we can assume that the Tukulka is an Old One's machine. Further supported by this is the Old Ones are claimed to be experts of psychic engineering, having crafted the webway, and that was Lexiconum's words, crafted the webway, among with other dimensions, alternate dimensions, which could explain how the Tukulka could be said to navigate during the heresy. I'm assuming. It was also so that it could fight, that the Lion used it to fight Conrad Kurz, but that's literally all it said. How it used it was not stated. So we have a portal creator made by the Old Ones and an Astartes of dubious intention. So let's look at the final evidence of the Schizo post of a lore video. Alright, so I know that this one's a reach, but let's talk briefly on the destruction of Caliban. As as the 40k wiki suggests, the time rift scattered the 30k fallen, which would explain the widespread nature of the fallen in the 40k setting. Naturally, these two stories were made decades after one another, so it would be hard for them to have planned that. But there's 2 major indications that the time rift succeeded. The first one is that the major astrological anomaly or disturbance shortly before or during the destruction of Caliban, which, spoiler alert, I hadn't researched it at that point of writing the script. I was about to get into that and I didn't want to spoil it for myself. And the second one, assuming that the time rift was before the destruction of Caliban, would be a major shift in numbers of garrison left and fallen encountered on Caliban during the destruction. But the destruction of Caliban, and for those who don't know, occurred directly after the Horus Heresy, as Luther, jealous of the Lion, succumbed to chaos and fortified Caliban against him. As the two parties came to blow, orbital barrages were exchanged, and the Lion led a charge into the Tower of Angels, the fortress monastery of the Dark Angels, to confront the fallen angels and Luther himself. A lot of angels in this one. Now, due to the Dark Angels bombarding the planet and a warp storm caused by the Chaos Gods, bitter that Luther couldn't kill the Lion, fucking spoilers, Caliban shattered, straight up exploded, got Death Starred, as well as throwing all of the fallen across the universe, saying that they were sucked into the warp and just shed out elsewhere. So who knows where. Now, as the warp storm has stated to be caused by the Chaos God, I was going to leave it at that, but then the Lexiconum directly just straight up states that the warp storm was actually caused by the Battle of Caliban system in M41, which is what we're talking about here. But just to exercise a double verification and to make sure that there's beyond a shadow of a doubt that this isn't just coincidence, let's just do a little bit of a study on the... What am I talking about? Let's do a little bit of a study on the numbers game. We'll play the numbers. So starting off with the baseline, the Lexiconum outright states at the beginning of the destruction of Caliban, there were 30,000 fallen angels on Caliban, right? So 30,000 is what we're going to have to deal with. Ironically, at least, I must say. And let's go over the history that led to the destruction of Caliban's forces, how they grew and got there. The initial exile of Luther to Caliban by the Lionel Johnson is because of, dumbing it down here, Some secretly chaos worshipping people tried to nuke the Invincible Reason, which is the flagship of the Dark Angels, which Luther thankfully almost entirely stopped with only minor damage to the ship. All things said, that is best case scenario considering we're talking about a nuke, right? However, Johnson was outraged that Luther even managed to let the nuke get on board the ship, which is fucking. I would consider that to be a bit of an overreaction, but you know, as far as that goes, Luther, a junior librarian named like Zariel or something like that. Don't think I wrote it down here. Yeah, no, it wasn't. But basically, Luther, Zariel, I believe it's pronounced, and 500 other Dark Angels were exiled to Caliban, which is a lot less than 30,000. I'm sure you're all aware. However, Caliban was the recruiting. What's the word? Caliban was the recruiting planet for the Dark Angels, so it's entirely possible that there was, you know, some shenaniganery going on with Luther making Dark Angels that were loyal to Luther himself and not, you know, the Emperor or the Lion himself. And given that a date was not given on the time of this betrayal and all that, not betrayal, what's the word? I don't know, but you understand the point. Also, something to bring up, we're dealing with time warps here, so it is possible that some of them got thrown even further back in time, which could lead them, throw them on Caliban, which is highly unlikely, but it's just something to throw out there because we weren't given a date when Luther, or I wasn't given a date when Luther was exiled, and I didn't feel like tracking one down. So assuming it was like right before the Horus Heresy, it would have given him 9 years, which probably isn't enough to get him 29. He needs to get all of these guys have been recruited just for him. It's crazy. I don't know. But yeah, that's a lot of forces for him to make up. It is possible, but there's a big jump, like we said. Yeah. Hold on. There you go. Alright, thank you for bearing with me for all that bullshit. But to conclude this video and try to hold some semblance of it being a lore video, let's try to explain this battle with everything we've learned and try to put it in place. So the Tucholka engines were used to bolster the forces of everybody involved for their own reasons. A bit like everyone fighting over Davy Jones's heart in Pirates of the Caribbean. Azrael wanted to right the wrongs of the past and nip the fallen in the bud, which would increase the numbers of Dark Angels. And also, you know, they wouldn't have the shame and the unforgiven and all that, so would have made them a more normal chapter. Typhus wanted to use the gene seed mixed with his own and the Loyalist Dark Angel gene seed that he found and the other fallen to make an entire legion loyal to him, much like Luther did in the, like we just talked 10 millennia ago on the very planet they're going to. And Marir Astalan was genuinely just a footnote in both articles, so I'm assuming he was just there to say that the Fallen were there. I don't know. The battle broke out, just at there. Nothing changed. The entire Dark Angels chapter was there. The warp rift scattered. Then the Unforgiven came and mopped everything up. But the nature of the how it closed, we're going to change a little bit. So the battle broke out, and Azrael closed the rift after the advice of Librarian Ezekiel, who wanted to leave the past as it was, not sure why, scattering the enemy forces. But as the genie cursed Jafar by him not being specific enough with his wish, the Tucholka cursed Azrael by scattering the 30k Dark Angels as well, thus perpetuating the cycle. Alright, now let's get past some just other questions. So I decided to go with a mixture of both the wiki and lexiconum sources, as they both had better points and more specific details on different parts of the articles, making a fuller story. So yeah, there we go. So it is going to be, it did change a lot from the top, from the initial summary. Another question: why would the Tukulka engines betray Azrael like that? From what I believe is, again, much like the Jahangir from the Cald Warden segment in the Successor chapter video, it's just a little weird, too weird of a coincidence for me, right? So I'm thinking that it was deliberate, as I mentioned with the snake, the snake pattern. And as we can see, like Jafar, snakes are seen as kind of deceptive backstabbers or betrayers, right? It's displayed in media, and I think that Games Workshop tried to fit the actions of the machine more to this name by giving it the subtle act of betrayal, as snakes are often seen in media as double crossing. I already described that. Sorry. I'm bouncing between remembering what I wrote in the script and then actually reading the script, and it's really fucking up the flow. So just thinking about it, the Dark Angels took out the defenses on Caliban, and even if the Fallen repelled the initial attack, they wouldn't even survive a short siege. Also, given Azrael's initial mission to rewrite history for the Dark Angels, we can retroactively see from an outsider perspective that the Fallen would have just died out on Caliban if he just didn't do anything in M41. And by scattering the Fallen, the Tukulka engine stabbed the Dark Angels in the back so well that they didn't even realize it. Alright? Now, I know that this sounds like I'm fucking crazy, but you gotta hear me out on that. And now for the messiest part of any 40k story involving him is going to be Cypher. As the only thing confirmed about Cypher is that he's a fallen angel. I think that he would have been there for the destruction of Caliban, obviously, and has just been doing whatever since. So given the context of his mysterious everything, I think I'm allowed to just make shit up here. Considering what we've learned, I think Cypher turned himself into the Dark Angels with the information on the Tukulkan engine in order to ensure that the battle occurs, the Battle of the Caliban system, thus ensuring the survival of the Fallen entirely through creating the warp storm that sucked them all and shat them all out shucked them all out elsewhere in the universe. And thus also technically saving Luther, because Luther had to fucking... what's the word? Because Luther would have died if somebody came up on their body, if Caliban wasn't destroyed, all that hoopla, you know? But yeah, so on and so forth, butterfly effect, you get what I'm trying to say. But I think that this could also be implied by, or this could also be because Cypher being loyal entirely to Luther by being one of the created fallen angels. But that's all theory, because I think they could only do harm to this to the character if Games Workshop gave him some lore. That's just me, so fuck it. But yeah, that's out. That's it. That's all I have written down. Thank you for thank you for sitting through that bullshit that I just spewed out. Yeah, like and subscribe. All that good, thank you for watching. All the good stuff. Thank you. I don't know. See y'all guys in the next video.